What are we waiting for? This is a question we've all asked in the past several weeks, no doubt, as we complain about and perhaps even debate the shelter-in-place order and all the ways it's inconvenienced our lives and impacted our futures. We are left waiting for the virus to run its course, waiting for the spread to end, waiting to get back to work, back to school, waiting for more bandwidth, right? Waiting for the rain to stop so we can go outside, waiting for the day that we can see our friends, waiting for the time when we can be together again and pass the peace after sharing in the life of God at the Eucharist table. Our texts for this fifth Sunday in Lent remind us of what we're ultimately waiting for: the restoration of all things, the defeat of death, the promises of God to become actualized. The circumstances of COVID-19 remind us that we are still in the wilderness. And in this prosperous age that we live in, sometimes that's a good reminder. We're still in the valley of dry bones, waiting for the breath of God to enter us and give us life that will last. In the midst of our waiting, Psalm 130 focuses us. Hope in the Lord. Hope in His Word, in His promises. Put your hope in that which God is doing for this world. Wait for the steadfast love of God to appear, to make its surprising entry into our wilderness struggles. Psalm 130 reminds us that our wilderness of waiting is the culmination of personal, corporate, and systemic sins that are entwined in such a mess that it seems impossible to untangle. Sins that we've inherited, sins that we've perpetuated, sins that we've committed with word and deed, and sins we've committed by leaving things undone. We are all both victims and victimizers. And like it or not, we're all in this together. The good news is that God will redeem Israel, and in so doing will also redeem all the world of its iniquities. That's what Psalm 138 proclaims. He will untangle this mess. Our texts from Ezekiel 37 and John 11 point us to the last chapter of that untangling, to the defeat of death, the resurrection of the dead. The graves will be open. We shall live. We shall be restored to the land. So what God offers us is not merely a spiritual salvation. It's not just a metaphor. It's not just promising to deliver us from this physical world. Rather, He has tied Himself to the beauty of His creation project. His salvation must restore all things. Like Lazarus, our hope is not that we shall become disembodied spirits living in some otherworldly place, but that we too shall come out of our graves and live. This hope enables us to live differently in this world, to live differently in this wilderness of waiting. We don't have to take and keep. Death is not the ultimate force in this world, driving us to compete against one another for resources in life, as Darwin would have it. No, we know differently. We know that life is the last word. So that even death in obedience to God, death in service to our neighbors, is not the end. So we are freed to love, freed to suffer in this rebellious age that we live in. But to live in this way in our wilderness of waiting, we must set our minds on the Spirit, Paul says in Romans 8. That is to say, we must participate in this new life initiated by the Spirit that raised Jesus Christ from the dead, which was a foretaste of the life that awaits us. We don't have to take and keep. We don't have to compete for limited resources. We don't have to live by the rules of this age. This is what Paul means when he talks about setting our minds on the flesh. Instead, we can receive and give. The Spirit, who Paul says dwells among us, is leading us to see, to live, to love differently. Because he's conforming us to Christ in his faithful image-bearing life. We no longer need to bow down to our impulses or our instincts, our desires that have been shaped by the age of Adam, the age of what Paul calls flesh. Instead, we learn a new way of life in the wilderness, in the Spirit. So as the Spirit already breathes life into our dead bones while we await, as Paul says later in Romans 8, the redemption of our bodies. The Spirit helps us in our weakness, in our wilderness, in our waiting. He even intercedes for us, working in us to will and to work for God's kingdom, for God's good pleasure. So, let's focus our waiting. Let's wait in a particular way, waiting on what the Lord will provide for us now to live in the way that bears witness to our future hope. Paul's point in our Romans 8 reading is that we belong to Christ. The Spirit who raised Christ from the dead is giving life to our mortal bodies now. We can walk in newness of life. We can bear witness to the life that is to come by keeping in step with the Spirit. So in this season of Lent, our homework is to explore what this means. Let's ask God once again, what does it mean to walk according to the Spirit, to set our minds on the Spirit of life and peace, alone and together? Let's ask ourselves that question.